In this video I'll be showing you how to replace the LCD screen and or the touchscreen on a regular switch V1 or V2. As you can see from here when I turn it on, this side of the screen has impact damage and that side's all black as well. Now, to know whether you have to change the glass or not, it's kind of hard to tell when the screen's damaged because you can kind of navigate your way to the settings and test the input devices, go to touchscreen. As you can see, it seems to be working fine this side, but there's no way to tell if there's dead spots over here. So once we change the screen, then we'll be able to test the touchscreen. So I'll just start on that now. First thing, I'll just turn the Nintendo Switch off. Now, there's a couple of different types of screws to take out here. There's tri-wing screws and then there's Phillips screws of different sizes as well. The first ones I'll take out is the Phillips screws on the top and bottom of the switch. Let me just show you. There's one here and then there's one here and here. The reason I take these out first is because they're the weakest screw holes, so it's easier to damage them. So I like to take them out when the other screws on the body of the switch are holding it all together and there's less pressure on these holes here, so I'll take these out first. You don't need much pressure to put them in or out. You just have to loosen them a bit, and there's not much screwing to them, to be honest. So that's those three out, and then there's another Phillips screw. Oops, they come off, it's fine. Another one here, just underneath the micro SD connector. Again, it's very small and fragile. Let me just put that kickstand back on. There we go. Now the next ones I'll take out is there's a lot of screws along the sides of the rail here. The middle screw is the one that needs to come out. Just the middle screw on both sides. So that one, and then this one here. There's 5 screws all together on each side. Just take out the middle one. Now we need to change to a tri-wing. I'm going for a tri-wing 0 size. 4 screws here. These are the tri-wing screws, or the Nintendo screws. So take the 4 of them out and then this back panel will come off. Obviously, before you take the back cover off, just make sure there's no micro SD card in there in case it gets caught and breaks, because it'll be sitting slightly over the back cover. So make sure there's no cards and everything in there, and there's none in here. So you just lift that off, and you'll see what I mean now about those holes being very fragile. Like, that's the wee tabs there. Like, they're quite small, and you'll find a lot of switches that they're actually broken just from regular use of the switch. Now we're back to our Phillips 0 I'm using here. First of all, let's take off this micro SD card reader. It's held on by 1 screw, so you just lift that up. There's a wee connector underneath this sponge part here. Just pull it up. You don't need to be too rough with it. Just pull it up and you'll see the wee connector there. It's quite fragile as well, especially the one on the board, and it's a bigger job changing that than it is changing the SD card reader itself. Now you have a few silver screws here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 including the SD card reader, but there's 6 more left now to take off, and then we'll remove this heat shield. Now just lift that up, straight up, and there should be no problem taking that off. Now you can always tell, or nearly always tell, if a switch has been worked on if the sponge here has been torn, because most people don't bother taking the time to heat that and lift it off. I personally don't sometimes either. If it breaks, it breaks, but you can sometimes tell if a switch has been worked on by that. Now the first thing I'll do is disconnect the battery, because we don't want any power flowing through this board. So once the battery is disconnected, we'll take off this heatsink here. There's 3 silver screws holding this on, so take the 3 of them off. Now, because this is generally the first thing you take off when you're working on a switch motherboard, that's why you can tell if somebody's been at this. Now, I just like to soak in a bit of isopropyl alcohol to soften the glue, and then I try to peel it up. But as I say, I don't be too fussy with it. If it lifts up fine, then all the better, but if it doesn't, then I'll just tear it. But the first thing is stuck down, you'll need to just lift up this part of it here, because there's a bit of a bond with the thermal paste there. It's holding it down, so you need to lift that up first and then you can work on the sponge. I just try to peel it away like that. It's tore a wee bit there, but as I say, it's fine. And just lift it up out of the way. I will clean this, but I'll do that later. Okay, so the next thing to come out is the game card reader, which is also a connector for the touchscreen. It's what connects the touchscreen to the main board. So you have a few more screws here. You have 3 more screws holding that on. So you have 2 screws holding in this wee black bit of plastic here, and then you have one at the bottom. Now first thing you do is just lift this connector here. Let me zoom in here because this connector can be quite fragile. You have a long black connector here. Just get your nail and just flip it up there. And then once that black connector, that flaps open, you can just start pulling back this flex cable. And then the next thing to take up is this connector here. Depending on how confident you are in it, use a plastic tool to if you can get something the same size of connector, the better, and just peel it up. I can do this with tweezers and everything, but I know what kind of pressure everything can take, but I recommend using like a black plastic spudger for something like this. So that's the game card reader out. I'll zoom back out here now. Now the next thing to take out, it depends on how much you want to take out. Probably if you're doing this for the first time, it's better to take out everything, but it's not completely necessary. I will take out the fan, I think it'll be handier to have that out, but I'll show you what I mean in a minute. So there's 3 screws holding in the fan, and there's another little small connector here, just the same way we opened the connector on the game card reader. Just do the same here, only it's a grey flap, so lift the grey flap up and pull that cable back and out of the connector. Now that's the fan out. Now here's the connectors for the, let me zoom in again. This is the connector for the touchscreen. It's going to need to come out for us to get at the LCD screen, and this is the connector for the LCD screen itself. Now what I might do is just leave everything in and just work with taking these out. You could take the whole motherboard out and that would give you better access to the wee gap under there to feed the LCD cable through, but I want to make this as easy as possible and taking up as least time as possible, so I think that's what I'll do. So open the LCD connector the same way you open the touchscreen connector, but be extra careful with it. The LCD connector is a bit more fragile because it has rows of pins above and below the cable, so you need to get them in and out correctly. If you put that too high or too low and put too much pressure on it, you can bend pins up or down. So just lift the connector again, and then you'll see there's 2 wee notches here at the side of the cable. I use tweezers and I just put them on each side and just kind of walk the cable out and pull it up. So that's that done. Next thing we need to do is heat this touchscreen. We need to heat around here, soften the adhesive and pry it up. Now, good chance this touchscreen will need to be replaced as well, but we'll not know till the end. So we need to be careful with this too. You don't want to break this, so be gentle with that touchscreen. The LCD screen is going to be replaced no matter what, it's done, so we don't have to be extra careful with that, which means I can use isopropyl alcohol here without the worry of it leaving watermarks on the LCD screen, so I don't need to be too careful with that. So first thing I do is you can use different things. You can use a hairdryer if you're working with tools like that. You can use a heat pad. What I'm going to use is a heat gun here. I'm going to set it to 230 degrees at about 50% airflow. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to heat around the edge here. Now because the connector's on this side, we're actually going to lift from here because we don't want to damage anything. Like that's where it's going to be, what would you say? That's where it's going to be most attached to the body of it because the cable's feeding through there. So you don't want to lift the side up and start breaking cables. We'll lift it from here and then we'll work our way down, and then we'll have more leeway to wriggle the cables out, I suppose is the best way to put it. So we'll heat the whole thing, but we'll be starting from this side. Now we'll give that a wee go. So you're going to want a thin pry tool. As I say, we're starting from this side here, the battery side. So you'll want a thin pry tool to do this. This is the thinnest one I have, might be too thin. I'll try get into this first and try and get under that adhesive. But I might need something stronger. Yeah, this is going to bend too much. I have an iFixit wee Jimmy tool here, whatever it's called. So I'm going to actually use that to make an opening. And then I'll get some picks in there. Now don't be too rough for these. I know it probably looks like I'm being a bit rough, but I'm used to working on these, so I kind of know what it can and can't take. Now I've made a wee opening there. What I'm going to do is, let me get some isopropyl alcohol in this wee bottle here. I'm going to use isopropyl alcohol as well to deactivate the adhesive. So now that I have an opening there, I'm going to just use this wee dropper and put some isopropyl alcohol in that opening. And that should help me. Yeah, you can already hear the glue lifting better there. Oh, yeah, like see how easy it is to get in there now. And I'm going to use one of these little picks as well. You can use guitar pick or whatever, but I'm using this one for my Fixit because they actually won the competition and got those. Well, not just those, but. And I'm going to actually put some isopropyl alcohol in the cap here and just wet the end of the picks as well to help them slide along here. So you're just working your way along quite gently. As I say, if you're just replacing the touchscreen and not the LCD, I wouldn't recommend using too much isopropyl alcohol because it can leak into the screen and cause watermarks and everything. Oops, sorry, I set that camera there. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend isopropyl alcohol if the screen's working. In that case, you would just use more, you just keep using heat and soften it and work it bit by bit. So that's one side open there now, and just working on the next side now. Now we're down to the corner here where the cable is, so I need to be careful. A bit more isopropyl alcohol, try and soften around there so I can wriggle that cable out. There we go, it's coming out there now. So that's the touchscreen completely out, and this is the cable I was talking about. The cable runs the whole way along there, so you have to be careful along that whole side. There's just a bit of adhesive around the edge that's connecting the screen on, but it's not as thick as the adhesive around the rest of the screen. So that's that taken off. I'll leave it for testing later. Now the next thing to take off is the LCD screen. As I say, it's fed in through this cable, so just try and work that out. The screen itself's already fallen out. It's not stuck in with adhesive. It just sits in the wee groove here, and then the touchscreen, sorry, keeps it in place. So, excuse me, feed that out there. You know, you don't need to be too careful because obviously the screen's broken, but I just don't want to be leaving a mess. So I'm trying to feed it out from the other side. There we go. Oh, sorry, big mistake I made there, jiggers. The screen has two connectors. It has one here for the display and it has one down here for the backlight. So just disconnect this one down here too. Let me show you. So this one down here needs to come out. So you've worked the big cable out, and then the small one down there just comes out with it. So that's the broken LCD. I'll put that somewhere over here for recycling. Now I'm going to go get a replacement LCD and we'll put that in first. So this is a replacement LCD screen here, salvaged from another working model. Well, non-working model, but the screen was working. So this is the first thing that we will put in here. It's a bit awkward. Let me see what's the best way to show you this. Let me clear this a bit here. get this dried up a little bit. Now the first thing you're going to want to feed in first is the main LCD cable. So it sits in there. The screen is going to be sitting like that. It's going to be sitting like that. So the way I probably do it is I fold the screen back like that and try and work the cable in. Now if you bought a brand new replacement cable, your cable's probably going to be flatter like that anyway. This one's already kind of bent to the way it should be because it was in another working model. So this is why I was saying as well, maybe if you want for the first time you can remove the motherboard. You can maybe make it a bit easier, but just too much effort for me. So when that's fed in there, just check that it go out. Yeah, it came out there like that. Should be no problem. Now the next thing to feed through is the backlight cable for the bottom here. So yeah, probably tweezers will be handy for this one. Now it needs to go down. It's going to be hard for me to show you this, but if you look at it, you can just see for yourself. The backlight cable needs to go down and then comes up on the other side of the motherboard. Like just like that. It's in there now. So yeah, I'll just connect that cable now. Now be very careful with this. As I say, it's a fragile connector, so try and pull it back and then feed it in. It's kind of, I'll be honest, probably you'll not learn this lesson until you break one. There should be no pressure when you're feeding this in. It should be quite smooth. So if you're starting to feel pressure and it's not going in right, then just take it out and try again, because you don't want to bend those pins. There, that's that in there now. And then I'll put the backlight cable in now that I'm here. There we go. Now we can quickly test this screen to make sure it's working and make sure you've connected it up properly by putting the battery in and just pressing the power button here. Yeah, that's working fine. So we'll just disconnect that battery again and test the touchscreen to see is it still working, or do we need to replace that as well. Now the adhesive of this still looks quite good, so we can just reuse that. We don't need to take that off, but we'll just feed this in here. I don't want to stick it down just yet because, well, you know what, actually I'll leave it kind of sitting. I'll put a couple of picks under it because I don't want the adhesive to stick down completely, because in case it's broken I'll need to take it off. But I'll leave a couple of picks sitting in under here so that if there is a problem it'll be easier to lift off. Now I'll just turn this around, because to test the touchscreen we'll need to reattach the game card reader, because the touchscreen actually connects into the game card reader and then the game card reader connects into the rest of the board. Now let me get that cable fed through enough that it can reach the game card reader. And you want to make sure that LCD screen's sitting in that groove as well. If it's sitting up past it, then you're likely to damage it when the touchscreen goes down fully. But let me get this. This is the awkward part. I'll see will the cable reach now. Again, make sure the wee flaps up before you put it in. There we go, perfect. Now press down on the connector once you have it in. Because it's this connector that actually takes all its information to the board. So make sure that's down properly. Now I will attach the battery again, turn it on, and assuming everything's connected properly, I should be able to test the touchscreen fully and see do we have any dead spots. Fingers crossed we don't. It'll save money for the customer if the touchscreen's still fine. So you go into settings, you go down to controllers and sensors, and then scroll down this menu to test input devices and then test touchscreen. Now we just want to go over the whole thing and make sure that there is no dead spots anywhere, especially on the impact side, on the left side here. And amazingly, there seems to be fine. The damage is actually strong enough to bend the touchscreen, break the LCD underneath, and the touchscreen's still working fine. Yeah, no, that's all working fine. So I'll just reattach that touchscreen. Well, I'll disconnect the battery again first, turn this thing off. And I will, just so I get it in place, make sure everything's 100% right and that cable's in the right place, I'm just going to disconnect the game card reader again. So to give myself a bit of leeway here. Now make sure you have no debris or anything sitting on that screen there before you attach everything, because the one thing you do not want to see is when you have the touchscreen back down, you do not want to see any dust or hairs underneath it, because that will drive you crazy. So now I have that done, I'm just going to get this touchscreen back into place, press it down, and then I'll reheat the adhesive once it's in place. Now be careful as well, because this thing has a habit of sticking, this cable has a habit of sticking to that adhesive ring around the outside. You need to pull it back a bit, you know, there needs to be, the adhesive still needs to be touching here, not that cable. I'll just give us a wee quick wipe actually as well, the inside of it, just in case I got any dirt on that. And just slide it straight down to that opening there. And just line up the edges and push it in. Should be flat, should be flush around every edge. There's a wee bit of a lift here. I'm just wondering, did the adhesive kind of double back on itself, or will I just need to clamp that down? No, it looks fine there. This is where I lifted it at the start. I'll just clamp that down after, and that'll hold that. I'll heat it, and then at the end when I'm having everything together, I'll heat it, and then I'll clamp that down, and that'll keep that flush. It's just where I pried it up at the start, it's kind of lifted a bit. But anyway, that's that done. That's the hard part done. LCD screen is replaced and the touchscreen is back down. So the next thing we have to do is start putting everything back together. So the last thing we took off was the fan, so that'll be the first thing to go back on. So just feed that cable into place, lift the grey flap on the connector, feed the cable into place, and push that connector back down. And then your 3 screws. Then our game card reader and headphone jack is to go on next. Be careful when you're pushing down this connector, because you don't want to push it down when it's in the wrong place. But just line up this gold square you see here on it. Let me zoom in here. So you'll see this gold square here. That's telling you where exactly the connector is on the other side of that. So just try and line that up with what you see on the board. I know it can be a bit awkward, but you get used to it. Although this one just does not want to play ball. There we go, perfect. And now your 3 screws go back on. One single one at the bottom. And then 2 up at the headphone jack, but there's a bit of black plastic that goes down first. Yeah, we'll clean this old thermal paste off now actually. That's what I'll do, because I want to put on fresh stuff now that we have it taken apart. So I'm just going to clean this off at the side here, but all you do is you just scrape off the old thermal paste and then you give it a wee clean with isopropyl alcohol, but I'll come back to that now. So the bulk of that cleaned off, and I'll do the same with the motherboard. So bulk's cleaned off. Now you can use wee cotton buds or whatever you want, but I'll just, for the sake of this, use a microfiber cloth, sprayed some 99% isopropyl alcohol. That'll clear off the old residue as well from the thermal paste. And now you need new thermal paste. What I use is Arctic MX4, but that's just what I use for everything. You can probably use a different brand, MX2 or even of the same brand, but it just depends what you want. I don't think the Switch needs that high a quality of thermal paste, but this is just what I have here, so I'm going to use that. And just put it back in the way you got it. Now this heatsink has 3 screws on it. I don't tighten them all before I put them in, but I don't tighten them completely because I just want them enough to hold the heatsink in place. And then when I have them all in, I'll make sure it's squared up and then I'll tighten them all. Excuse me. You know, I want to make sure this heatsink up here, there's vents in place with the fan, and then once it is, I tighten all 3 screws. Now a handy wee tip here for this speaker wire, I'm just going to zoom in to show you here actually, because if you don't do this, it can run into other problems in the future with the speaker. This speaker wire here, it's got a black and red wire. Make sure it goes under this thing here. See this bit of grey tape under the heatsink? Make sure they go under, like that. Because if they're sitting on top, what will happen is when you put the heat shield on, it'll compress those wires against that bit of metal. Eventually, one of those wires will break, or both of them will break, and if the red one breaks and starts getting shorted to ground, your switch will come up with an error, a specific error code to do with audio issues. And that's because the red wire is compressed that much it eventually broke. But if you keep it under here, the heat shield will not be pressing down on it and damaging it. And if you do get an error code, you're not sure if it's to do with the headphones or not, or to do with the speaker, sorry, the way to test that is put in a set of headphones into your switch and then try to turn it on. If it turns on with headphones in, but doesn't turn on with headphones out, it's an audio issue because having headphones in deactivates the speakers, so there's no power going to them, so it doesn't get shorted out. So that's the handy thing to know, to check if you have a speaker issue, just to try it with headphones. Now that's that done. Reconnect the battery, and then we can go to the heatsink now and start putting this back together. Now I'm just going to give it a wee brush. I like to clean off any dust that's on these when I'm working through them. So just dust off the heat shield. You'll see dust always gathers here. Now, no cables are going to get crushed here, so that's that down here. Let me see, make sure everything. Just always good to give everything a wee double check. Because you see these speaker wires here, actually I'm just going to push them in a bit more because I don't want them being crushed against the frame either. There we go. Now heat shield on. Now 5 screws all together and then a 6th one in the SD card slot. Or SD card reader, sorry. Now this is another little thing to watch when you're pushing this in. The connector is kind of fragile, so you're going to try and get I can't show you on camera properly, but you're going to I can't show on camera properly, but you're going to want to try and get a wee view in there and make sure you're lining up that connector properly. And then when you push it down, you don't need to push down too hard. You won't even necessarily feel the click or anything with this. You'll just know then when you try and lift it if it's connected or not. So yeah, just be careful with that connector as well. And that's the last screw in. Now we put on the cover, but again I'm going to dust it because it's got quite a bit of dust on it there. So push that down, make sure it's all clipped in along the top and the sides here. Now the first thing I put in is the tri-wing screws, as they were the last I took out. So I want them in there to hold the cover on tight, and then I can put the other screws in. Now back to the Phillips screws. I'll put the two in the side in now first before I put the rest in. So that one screw in the middle of each rail needs to go in. And then the next one I'll put in is the little one at the SD card slot. And last but not least is the very small ones at the top and bottom. Now just screw them in enough till you feel a wee bit of resistance. You don't want it. You don't want to overscrew them and rip the threads on the screw holes themselves. Now that's all back together. I'm just going to give that screen a wee bit of a wipe on the front there, just to clean that. Now I'll just go in and I'll test that touchscreen again now that we have it all back together, just to make sure everything's working. And if you're doing this for a customer, or even for yourself, you want to make sure that everything's working. Test the game card reader, test the SD card slot reader, because you just don't know. There could be anything in there. Maybe you didn't connect something 100%. Could be any wee issue. So it's always good to test it, even test the charging. Obviously, I'm not going to go through all that right now because this is just showing you how to change the LCD screen, but I'll just show you me testing the touchscreen for now. I'm going to take the glove off for this actually, just so I can test it better. Yeah, that's all working 100%, no dead spots there. So yeah, that's how you change the LCD screen in a Nintendo Switch and keep the original touchscreen and all that there. Now, as I say, what I'll do now is I'll heat this and then I'll clamp it in place, but I don't think I really need to show you that because there's nothing too special about that. You probably could get away with using this the way it is, but just because there's one wee bit there that I pried up at the start, I want to make sure that's completely flat. So yeah, that's that. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you learned something from that.